So, Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to ask you some questions about Brexit, and I couldn't think of anyone better to talk to. So, welcome you. So you're an e-commerce seller, but you're also a e-commerce business consultant, and you've worked closely with the government and London Growth Hub to deliver some training and workshops and guidance around Brexit. So I couldn't think of anybody better. Thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, I've got some questions for you that if you'd be so kind as to help me answer.
That'd be terrific, Chloe. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you here today.
You're welcome. So, what would your advice be to a company that's only just now working through the changes that they need to make ahead of Brexit?
Sure. Well, we practice what we preach. So, as you very rightly said, we do have two lines of business. One is in e-commerce. We sell 100,000 orders a year on Amazon using the Amazon Global Logistics and Fulfillment system. But also, we do advise a number of SMEs across the country on what they need to be doing to be preparing for Brexit. There is very little time left to do that. And our starting point is always our client's end-to-end supply chain. Even if your business isn't exporting to the EU, you might have goods and services in your supply chain that come from somewhere in the EU. So you need to take a good look at each of your products or indeed your services and ask yourself either who handles it or who adds value to it each step of the way. That will help you identify vulnerabilities along the way and where you might start to run into some difficulties. Then what you need to do is turn your attention to your suppliers, especially if you have any small or medium-sized organizations within your supply chain. For instance, if you're using a niche local labeling or packaging supplier, you will need to find out if they have audited their own supply chains to ensure they're robust enough as well. You don't want to be finding yourself in the position of where you've got loads of product ready to go and no labeling available for you to get it out the door. You also need to consider shipping routes. For instance, eSellers, our own domain. We use the Amazon's fulfillment network, and we're accustomed to selling in the UK and other countries in a way that can move items around from one EU country to another with ease. If you do sell in Europe and you want to continue after Brexit, you should consider splitting your business into a UK and an EU operation so that you'll have somewhere to set up perhaps e-residency for your business and then ship separately to both markets. You might want to consider somewhere like Estonia for this purpose. Now, finally, you'll need to consider the impact of customs and duty charges on your product and your margins on those products, because one thing we know for sure is the costs will go up.
Absolutely. I think that's some really good kind of key points there. I mean, the supply chain, for example, it's not just your supply chain. You're kind of saying your suppliers' supply chains as well. So it goes that step further, and there's a lot of considerations in there to unpack. Shipping routes and customs. I mean, it's almost a back to square one, a consideration of what is going to be profitable once you've added in all these additional charges.
That's absolutely right. We're finding that in many cases the charges are just really stacking up and adding up for a lot of businesses. And it's not just the increased charges of the suppliers turning around and increasing their costs back to our clients, but it's also our clients' cost of finding the stuff out. It means a
Yeah.
deviation from what they're doing so that they can start exploring these things and maybe unpicking some uh, issues and perhaps opportunities that they would have not known about before.
Absolutely. It's the initial investment to do the work, I suppose.
You're absolutely right.
So, can you run through the top line priorities for businesses that are looking to get sorted ahead of January 1st? And if there is anything that can wait until after that so that they can prioritize what they have to do at the moment?
Sure. Sure. Well, we are in this really interesting situation that we've known that something would be changing in our departure from the EU and our exit from the EU. We've known about this for a long time, and yet it's really only become more and more clear in the last few weeks as we lead up to December 31st, 2020, that this is going to be happening and that businesses, on top of all the other issues that they've had to face this year, really need to get prepared. It's a complicated process for many businesses. Uh, Businesses are learning about new areas of governance and relations with the EU that we've never really been accustomed to dealing with before. And there's a lot to get done in the few days and weeks that are still available to us. However, if you're planning to keep selling products or services in the EU after the 31st of December 2020, as I say, there's a lot to do. First of all, you'll need to onboard with a customs broker and a shipper able to ship your goods to the EU. Now, for this, you will require both a UK and an EU EORI number. These are Economic Operator Registration and Identification numbers issued separately by the UK and the target EU countries' tax offices. So that might be France or Germany or one of the other EU member states. Both sides will be swamped with requests, particularly now, so you need to factor in these delays into your timelines. You'll also need a clear understanding of your HS codes, which are 8-digit commodity codes. And there are various government resources that you can pop onto and do your explorations for what HS codes are suitable for your products. Mutual recognition of standards is ending, so you will need to ensure that your products are compliant with EU product rules, licensing, and with local rules in each country you plan to sell to. That's a big issue. You will also need to review regulations that might affect your company. So there are loads of them to check through. These could include, for example, business regulations, consumer regulations, information security, such as GDPR, intellectual property rights, such as trademarks, and any regulations that are specific to your niche sector. Financial regulation is also something that you will have to look at for payments and customer payments and that sort of thing. And as the EU and UK legal systems will become separate on the 1st of January 2021, you're going to have to review your contracts, particularly for your Incoterms. These are the international terms and conditions of service. And consider introducing, this is very important, consider introducing Brexit clauses into those contracts.
Brexit clauses. Okay, that sounds like a really genuinely good piece of advice. This just sounds like there is so much to consider, that it's so far reaching. So even just kind of the actual practical side of what you're going to do at the border, but you know, the codes and regulations that you've got to be up to. It's really about doing your homework and making sure that you've considered all of these areas that might trip you up when it comes to January. So
it is about doing the homework, and it is about getting to know your product better, perhaps. So we sell 1,000 different SKUs on Amazon in varying quantities. Some are a couple of units a month, and others are hundreds of units a month. One of the items that we sell is a keychain, and when you're going in and trying to find HS codes, it's not always clear. Do you go on the makeup, the composition? Is it a metal? Is it a plastic? Or do you go on what the thing is? Is it a toy? Is it a household product? Is it a luggage item? And each one of these will have a different HS code, and each HS code will determine the level of duties payable in the receiving country. So it does take time, and if you rush it and you make a mistake, it might wind up costing you quite a lot of money, either in penalties for underreported duties, or paying too much duty if there's no reason in your particular circumstance to do so.
And do you think that there will be a level of flexibility from the governing bodies around the codes, or do you think it's really important to get it right first time and do the research and make sure, like say, if it's a metal or a toy, for example?
We're pretty pedantic, and we would recommend getting it right the first time. There may be some organizations out there taking the risk. That would be on them. But we do recommend getting it right the first time, because the last thing you want is to do all of this research, all of this planning, get the logistics sorted out, get the financial terms between you and your suppliers and your clients sorted out, and then having a product stuck in customs.
Absolutely, that's what we don't want come January.
Exactly.
So, Chris, if your business doesn't trade with the EU at the moment, you might think that you're sitting pretty and you don't have to worry about Brexit and making sure that you're up to date. But actually, there must be some considerations that are maybe the sneakier ones that you haven't thought about or that aren't obvious. Could you run through any of those for me?
Yeah, absolutely, Chloe. Sure. This is a common fallacy that people in business are often thinking about. They're maybe UK-based businesses, maybe local businesses. Their suppliers are uh, maybe just up the road from them. They deal in sterling all the time. So it's quite easy to jump to that conclusion that you don't trade with the EU, and therefore there's nothing to worry about. I think the fact here is that we've been in some way, shape, or form integrated with the EU for decades now, the better part of 4 or 5 decades. And there will be some aspect to your business life that will touch on one of the many regulatory regimes that we have with the EU. So here again, we're back at looking at your supply chain. All the indications are that we're looking at major delays occurring in the new year due to the new customs procedures that will be put in place. So you really need to understand what impact that's going to have on your business, particularly if you're unable to restock as quickly as you're accustomed to. So many businesses that we talk to have been preparing by stockpiling products ahead of time. But if you haven't already done this, it's probably too late to do this now. Certainly, the delays in the global logistics systems caused by the COVID-19 pandemic certainly haven't helped matters. If you are going to do this, to restock and build up your supply chain, you need to consider what additional costs it may entail. For example, we're seeing our shipping costs increase dramatically, not only because of the pressures on the global systems, but because we're losing some economies of scale in certain areas, thanks to the UK coming out of the Amazon Pan-EU FBA logistics network. So we're losing all that buying power, and now that's transferring to us. There are other things that we need to think about too. Do you employ staff from the EU? Have they applied for settled status in the UK so that they can actually stay here? And finally, if you need or plan to recruit staff from the EU in the future, there is a new points-based immigration system to contend with. You'll need to register as a sponsor, and there will be various costs associated with the new system. So all in all, expect it to become more challenging and more expensive to hire staff from the EU, unfortunately.
That's a really big consideration, I expect, for a lot of companies, that might have been an underlying one that they may not have considered.
In organizations where EU staff have been our friends and colleagues working alongside of us on a day-to-day basis for months or years, it tends to be something that we just don't worry about. We just don't think about. But unfortunately, now we have to go through um, that analysis and just make sure that we can support them as best as they can to stay in the UK and keep the business operating successfully.
Absolutely.